All right, so in this one, we're going to talk about model managers and how we can use them. Now, by default, there's already some model managers actually inside of our Django project. So if I look into the models, I'll just write a few examples here. So I could do match.objects.all. I could do match.objects.get, and then we would say user A equals to some user. And you could do match.objects.create user A also equals to some user. So these are forms of a model manager, right? So this brings back a query set. This brings back a single instance. This also has a single instance associated to it as well. And what's nice is this is something very similar to doing, let's say, new instance equals to match. So that creates a normal instance of a class in Python in general. And then we could do new instance dot user A equals to some user. And this is now assigning that user A, and we would say new instance dot save. So this right here, this call right here is the exact same thing as this call right here, which is kind of cool. But now we can actually work with this new instance variable where this doesn't have a new instance variable. So if we really wanted to complete it, it would be just like that. So these are the same. So that's just something to think about when it comes to actually creating and using model managers. Now these are default. These are ones that are already in there, which is kind of cool, useful for us, but we want one that's a little bit more dynamic because, first of all, we have two different users here. And every time we get a match, we want to reference both users, right? So if user A and user B are being compared, we shouldn't have two different models or two different instances for those users. They should be one instance itself, because what I see as our match percentage should be the same thing as what you see as our match percentage, assuming we are the ones being matched. So that's what we need to do. And to do this, we'll create our own custom manager. So match manager, and it's doing models.manager, and we will define a new function called get or create match. Now, yes, there is a get or create manager built in, so I'll just put it in here down below so you can see it. There is another one called get or create, which essentially is getting that user, or it's going to create it, and it sends back a tuple of the instance and whether or not it was created. So a true or false value. So we're actually going to go off of something like this. These ones you can play around with yourself and just kind of see how they work. You will be able to play around with them very similar to like what we end up showing you. So this get or create match is what we'll be working with. And it's going to take in a few arguments. First off, it's going to take in self, so the instance that it's going to be working with. And then we're going to also add in user A equaling to none and user B equaling to none. So some keyword arguments here. And this we're going to actually go through and try and get the user A or user B first. So we'll just do a try block here. And it'll be self.get, and we'll do user A is equal to user A, and then user B is equal to user B. And we're going to just give this obj, so object or instance, basically. And if there are any errors here, we'll just say except obj equals to none. And since we're doing this, we want to do it on the reverse way as well, and I'll explain this in just a second. So obj2 is equal to self.get, user A is now equal to user B, and user B is now equal to user A. And of course, these arguments here are coming from our function itself. So the method that's actually being passed, the arguments that are being passed are coming down here. So if I change this to being A and B, you'd have to change these to being A and B as well. All right, so I could leave it just like that, but I'm going to leave it how I had it. Okay, so again, if there's any errors, we'll say except, and then we'll just say obj equals to none. Now, we have to think about what we're going to return, because if I said back here, down here, I said this get or create returned the instance and whether or not it's created. So now we have to think about whether or not we are sending back an instance. So if obj and not obj2, then we'll return obj and false, because it's not created, it's getting it. Right? So obj is going to be the instance that it's returning because obj exists, and then obj2 it does not exist. And there's a reason that we can do this is because we are going to be setting these. We're going to use get or create match only, right? So this is the only time, the only manager that we'll use to actually create these matches in the first place. So that means that user A and user B is going to be either one or the other. It's never going to be two of those, right? So one way or another, we're going to be getting user A is going to be in position A or user B is going to be in position B. I'll explain this once we actually go through it and see this with real users, because it's a little complicated here. But essentially, this is trying to get it with users being in one position. This is trying to get it in reversed positions. And then down here, what we want to say is else if not obj and obj2, then we'll return obj2 and false, so it wasn't created. And then finally, we will say we actually need to create a new instance, so we'll say new instance equals to self.create, and this is going to be user A equals to user A, and user B equals to user B. This order right here does not matter. Like this could be user B, and this could be user A. It doesn't matter because of all of this right here. But I'll keep it nice and consistent with everything else. So now that we have this new instance, we're going to want to calculate the percentage on each side for these users. So let's actually stop for a second, and I'm going to say we need to come back to add match percent here. But for now, I'll just say new instance dot match decimal is equal to 80.85, and then I'll do new instance dot questions answered. I'll just say 20, and then new instance dot save. And then finally, we'll return new instance and true, because we created a brand new instance for it and all that. So really, what we have to do still is use this utility function to bring back our matches and the percentage, what would actually fall in these numbers. But the reason I haven't done it yet is because we had to do some extra stuff here that we didn't actually make a function out of, so we'll actually have to come back to that in a later video. But now we've got this match manager, that's good. So let's go back down to matches here, and the one thing that I need to fix is this Unicode, and I'm going to use some string substitution here by doing exactly what we had in the other one, which was .2f, which is this down here. So we can actually have the two decimal places for the decimal itself. And then finally, to bring in the manager, I just add in objects, and I'll say match manager, and then actually initialize it by using parentheses. You can also say something else if you wanted. You could say ABC. ABC would then be, you would do match.abc.get or create match, just like that. But I want it to be objects because that's the convention. So we'd keep it at objects. So you could try that if you want, but we want it to be at objects instead. So just like this. All right, so now that we have this manager up and ready, let's actually try it out. So let's go into the terminal, and just going to go into the shell, do python manage.py shell, and we're going to do from matches.models import match, and then from django.contrib.auth import get user model. And of course, if you weren't typing those out, you could just copy this right here, this get user model. All right, so now that we've got that, we'll say user equals to get user model and user.objects.all. If you remember, it's that. So I'll say A equals to user.objects.all and the first position, and then B user.objects.all and the second position. So A is JMitchell3, B is Khaleesi. So now we can actually use this get or create call that we just made. So we'll do match.objects.get or create match, and then we'll say user A equals to A and user B equals to B. So this is our new one, get or create match. Make sure it's not get or create, because then you'll have some issues, but get or create match. And then if we hit enter, it says match equals to 85 and true. If I pressed up and press it again, it says false, so it wasn't created. And then if I change the order of them, so match A is actually now B, and then user B is now A, and hit enter, it's the exact same match instance. And the way we could also test this is by coming in here and doing 0, so position 0, that's coming back, and then .id 3, and then let's rotate them again, .id 3 as well. Yours might be 1, it doesn't really matter as far as that is, but the point here is no matter what user we pass in, it gives us back the same match ID or object, because that's where the match is really coming through. So this get or create call works with the exception of actually using the algorithm that we already created to calculate the match percentage. So again, this is get or create. It doesn't mean that we're updating it here. So when we create it, we will automatically make that match percentage. But when we're getting it, we might not necessarily need to update it. So that's something that we would worry about in a different kind of call. So just to think about that when you're getting it, you're not going to update it necessarily every single time is the point. So just think about that for now. But if you have any questions on how we did these model manager and what else you can do with model managers, let us know. But I will tell you that you can do all types of things here. So let's say we'd say all matches new or something like this. We'd say self, and then we could return self.filter, and then you could do a timestamp, and then greater than or equal to a date here. Some sort of date. So you could set a date, and then you could say anything greater than that date, it will return back a query set because we're using filter here. Where up here, we're using get, and then we're only returning an instance and a Boolean value. So there's all sorts of things that you could do with model managers, which we're just not going to get into because it's not necessary at this time. But if you want to see other things about this, definitely take a look at our website, codingforentrepreneurs.com, and you can see more about managers. But really, this is a very useful manager itself, and we can use it quite a bit on our apps. So now, if you think about this too, we would use this specific thing when we're ever looking at a user profile, or we want to combine these two users and kind of understand a little bit more about them. All right, so if you have any questions on this, let us know. Otherwise, let's keep going.